track 7, Students' Voices. What is this? It's the students' ability and right to freely express their opinions, beliefs, perspectives, and experience without fear of judgment. The global pandemic has necessitated online learning, leaving students wondering how to cope with this new normal. It is said that blended learning is a formal education style in which students learn through both traditional in-person teaching and online media. The aim of the blended learning is to create a generation of students who are in tune with today's realities. But what do students have to say about this? And so this session focuses on the stakeholders, the students' voice on the enablers required to thrive in a blended learning environment. And I'm going to introduce to you a bright, enthusiastic student from our own School of Liberal Arts, Mr. Googie Peter. He is a third-year student pursuing his BA in Liberal Arts with a specialization in international relations and economics. He's passionate about building bridges across cultures, especially between the African and Indian communities. Over to you, Peter.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you very much for these opportunities. I will jump directly to our talk of the day, and I hope all of you are as enthusiastic as I am today. And I will start this conversation by a little quote, or rather a little paragraph which says, universities and college campuses are places where we students live and study in close proximity with each other. And they are also buzzing cultural hubs where students are brought together from nations around the world. Now, recently, the foundations of these unique ecosystems have been impacted significantly by the rapid spread of coronavirus, creating uncertainty regarding the implications of higher education. Now, while classes in the beginning of new semesters and cancellations may be temporary, it is hard to foresee whether the novel coronavirus will result in a long-term disruption of higher education system. Now, today, we're very honored to have the opportunity to host an extremely colorful panel of students from different corners of the world who have not only displayed excellence in their specific areas of study, but have also displayed exemplary leadership skills representing various unions from different parts of the world as well. Now, in these discussions today, we shall have 2 questions for each of our esteemed panel members. Now, I shall start by introducing Ms. Shrishti Srivastava, and then followed by Felix Kombena, and after that we shall have Mr. Ashutosh and Madam Olivia in that order.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Felix Kobna-Donkor, calling in from South Africa, Johannesburg. And I want to thank you all for this wonderful opportunity and this great conference. So I'm a research fellow here at the University of South Africa. I'm a product of the Erasmus Mundus program and served as the president of the African chapter. And I'm currently serving on the HAQUA initiative, which is a joint program between the African Union and the European Union on harmonizing quality education and higher educations in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Felix. Now we may have Mr. Ashutosh to quickly introduce himself.
Hi. Thanks so much, Peter. Yeah, like Felix said, it's great to be a part of this wonderful, panel, and I'm delighted by the opportunity. So I'm a first-year PhD student in the Education Policy program at the Harvard University. I started my program last September, so I've not been to Harvard. I've been taking classes remotely from here in India. And before joining Harvard, I was a program manager at Stanford's Freeman Spogli Center. And I managed research in large economies such as India, China, Russia, and Korea. So I've been part of higher education policy, like discourse and higher education policy research for the last 4 to 5 years. Before starting my job at Stanford, I was the master's student there in their international and comparative education program. So I've had my fair share of experience as an international student, and I hope I'll be able to share something that I've learned over the course of 4 or 5 years, being an international student in another country. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ashutosha. We're looking forward to a very interactive session with you. Now, moving on, I see Srishti has joined us. Please, you may have 90 seconds.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, everyone, for this opportunity. I am Srishti Srivastav. I'm pursuing my PhD in Women's and Gender Studies from Ambedkar University, Delhi. And currently, I'm working on everyday experiences of women in the communist parties in India. And for like past 4 5 years, I have worked as a freelance journalist covering the issues related to gender, society, and campus for the digital platforms like The Wire, NewsClick. I've also worked as a radio broadcaster for BBC Hindi. And during the lockdown, and I covered many stories about students who were struggling and facing challenges because of online education and online learning that was really new for them. And these were the students mostly from the rural parts of India. So this is something very brief about me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Srishti. Look forward to exchanging unfiltered student voices with you and to learn as much as introduce yourself for the next 90 seconds.
Yeah, so my name is Olivia. I live in Germany and currently I'm finishing up my master's degree in psychology, so I'm also still a student. And today I will focus on the aspect of international mobility in higher education because, well, right now I was actually supposed to be abroad myself writing my master's thesis, which I'm unable to do, so I cannot graduate. This is why this topic is very dear to my heart, actually. But I am here today representing the Erasmus Student Network. This is the largest international student organization in Europe, actually. We are spread across over 500 universities in 42 countries, and our main purpose is basically to support students during their time abroad. And pretty much exactly 1 year ago, we launched a large-scale survey that investigated how the pandemic impacted the experience of international students in and from Europe. And we received more than 10,000 answers, so a lot of data to work with. And I'm really looking forward to share some insights from that today.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you very much, Olivia. We're also very excited and super excited to hear more about your experience and suggestions that you may have as a representative of one of the biggest student union in Europe. Now, I'll start immediately for my first question. I go straight to Ashutosh. First of all, I would like to express my excitement because we have a policy maker here or a policy expert in the building. Now, as a student who is enrolled in one of the most prestigious universities on the planet, as I might say, it's very unfortunate that you've been deprived of the opportunity to attend or to have physical experience in such a wonderful campus. Now, India, the time difference between India and the US is almost 10 hours. And you've been taking your classes from India. So what challenges have you faced so far and how have you been able to mitigate such challenges? And in doing so, what do you think your university can do to improve your learning experience as a student?
Right. Thanks a lot, Peter. Those are all fantastic questions. And I just want to step back and just want to talk about like when I got into the PhD, COVID pandemic was just, like coming in. I heard back from my PhD colleges in February. And I think one of the things that was complicated was my decision in terms of selecting colleges or selecting programs, because there was a lot of uncertainty with respect to the visa situation because it was an election year in the US. So the policy from the visa level was in a lot of flux. And then even at the university level, there was a lot of variation in like policy. So for example, for the international students, the regulation was that if you do not have any in-person classes, you cannot come to the US if you're a first-year student. But universities uniformly did not have these like policies. So my university did, but I know University of Pennsylvania, they made adjustments to their system, wherein they had one in-person course specifically so that like international students could come to the US and take the classes in the same like time zone. So I also just want to state at the outset that there was a lot of variation there. In my case, in the case of my university and my program in particular, which is an education policy program, and my school, which is the Harvard Graduate School of Education and the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, they had already announced that they are going to have the entire year online. So there wasn't any opportunity for me to travel to the US. But even within Harvard, there were schools. For example, Harvard has like the Kennedy School, which is a school of pure policy. And their first semester was online, but their second semester, parts of it were like in person. So students from other countries were able to move to the US or move to Harvard in like the second like semester. So those were some of the challenges, the variation in policy, both at the government level and at the university level, that created this uncertainty for students, right? So that was the broader context. In my personal case, like as you already mentioned, time difference was an issue. So definitely in the first semester, I struggled just kind of taking classes at 2 a.m. or like 1 a.m., which was a challenge. And there was very little social interaction. I think for a PhD program, maybe that's less of a problem. But for programs that center on student engagement, I think, of course, it's a bigger issue. My classes were largely like technical classes. So I think social interaction or classroom engagement wasn't that big an aspect. So I think in that way, it wasn't too bad. The time difference was definitely a problem. The lack of social interaction in general was a problem. The advantage that I had was that I had already studied in the US before, and I had worked in the US before, and I was familiar with the system. But for international students who haven't had that exposure or who haven't studied specifically in the US, for them adjusting to academic and cultural expectations, both of those things, in the same semester, and also like navigating online learning. So that must have been a challenge. So I was lucky in that regard that I had this prior experience. I also wanted to say I am very lucky in the regard of not having had COVID, not having any close family like members who had COVID. And I'm sure there are students who are also struggling with this on the side, where they had somebody who they were close to or themselves, they had like COVID. So I was lucky enough in those aspects. I think I have a longer answer in terms of the major takeaways, in terms of what universities can learn from the COVID experience and what they can carry forward. So I leave that to your second question. And I'll give like other people in the panel a chance to address like this question.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh. That was quite insightful. Moving on, I think it will be very exciting to come back to you and answer the second question. But in the meantime, I'll go straight to Mr. Felix, who is also a representative of one of the biggest student union in South Africa. Now, as a representative of student union there, what support system do you think the students need or require to receive, especially from universities? Mr. Felix.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I'll say that you can see that I'm wearing a face mask, which is the first one. So it's compulsory for everybody who comes on campus to have this, and I'm happy to be on campus. That's why you find me with a face mask at this moment. Now, in this situation, we've come to realize that washing hands, having sanitizers, social distancing, these are first lines of defense. So across universities, these should be spaces where these amenities like water for people, sanitation systems should be on point to avoid universities, campuses becoming super spreaders. Also, the provision of such resources like sanitizers, etc., to students and face masks should be made possible, because what you realize is some students are coming from homes where these are not available. So when it's provided them, they end up supporting their families and then being a line of defense against such spreading. Now, in this period, you see, before this period, we've seen people in conflict situations, students, academics in conflict situations, but then we didn't really understand their situation until this disruption happened. And now we are also experiencing what they've been through. And this is just 1 year. But then already we can see that the mental health implications of this pandemic has been huge. So in many situations, we will realize that even several of our universities have not been able to complete the academic year. So going forward, mental health is something that we should consider as we should integrate and make available to students. Furthermore, sanitation is also another issue. Then furthermore, we also have to look at in an unequal society like I have here, South Africa is often ranked as one of the most unequal societies. We are talking about blended learning, and blended learning, you need power, you need energy, electricity, people need to be provided with opportunity, the tools that they can use for the blended learning, which is like having a laptop or having computers. So I must commend universities in South Africa. Some universities really went out providing their students with laptops. They also provided data so that people in remote areas will be able to join in this. But then I must also admit that the experience has not been that, it hasn't been same as when people were together in class. Being in class together, even for learners or kids, it comes with additional skills, because apart from what you learn in class, there are some things which you learn as for your social intelligence, for your social and cultural intelligence, will help you to navigate your community. And these opportunities are being lost. So I think going forward, another support will be social skills that should be embedded for students to learn. Then finally, I would say that we've come to appreciate that the education system that we have is part of a system and interacts with a system. When there's something wrong with the system, there comes with repercussions on the education system. So, for example, the environment, in this COVID, we've come to understand that sustainability is something which we must all, as students, as academic and staff, should embrace and then spearhead proactively. That brings you to the Education for Sustainable Development, which has been a flagship agenda of UNESCO. So these are some of the issues I'll say for now.
Thank you very much, Felix. And I think I'll pick my next question to Olivia would be, I'll pick it up exactly from where you left. And you raised a very important point, which is student mental health. And I think most of us, the policymakers and the vice chancellors and chancellors who are part of the audience today, I think they will really like to hear from students on this front. So Olivia, who is also a representative of Erasmus Plus in Europe, my question to you is, given that you spoke about student mobility, during COVID-19, most students were stuck. Either they were stuck from going back home, they were not able to leave Europe, or they were not able to come back from their respective countries back to Europe. Now, this has caused a lot of challenges, and one of them is mental health. Now, what have you, as Erasmus Plus, what do you think, or what have you done so far to try and deal with mental health issues related to students? Or Olivia, to you.
Well, I'm not representative of the Erasmus Plus program. That is on on EU level, so we're not responsible for that. But we did collect all the students' voices on the issues that they had, and we did forward all the outcomes that we gathered to universities. So we did that, definitely. And the universities gave feedback that it was very helpful. So the pattern that we saw when talking to students from all over Europe was that the biggest problem for them was just the uncertainty, because I can imagine that many of you still remember how unpleasant it was to be, stuck at home with restrictions and not being sure when this all is going to be over. But especially when you're abroad in a country where you don't know anybody, that is just terrifying. And this uncertainty was what took the largest toll on the mental health of students. and they voiced what kind of support they would have wanted. And by far the point that was mentioned the most was just communication, because there were so many instances where universities would either just push them back and just say, well, we will talk to you later as soon as we know anything. And they were just stuck in this limbo, not knowing anything. And if you look on university level, it's of course very understandable, because you live in a country where there are travel restrictions changing daily and everything. So of course you cannot always give the students the answers that they want. Obviously that's not possible, but still just sending a sign that you're still hearing them, that you're still there for them, that is really, really important. Just being open for questions, giving the little support that you can give them made such a big difference, because the students that said they did get that support, they reported that they were much more confident, much more happy. But all the students that said, well, my university just didn't speak to me anymore, they were really, really anxious. And yes, of course, from the university, you cannot always answer all questions, because you don't know it yourself. You don't know what the country is going to decide when it comes to travel restrictions. But just telling them, like constantly updating them, we're still here. If this is the most that they can do, they should still do it, because that makes so much more of a difference than you would think. Just the whole communication part and giving them an open ear. If this is all you can do, then you should definitely still do that, because it does a lot, definitely.
Thank you very much, and I think I will also still roll back from where you just left, moving on to Srivasta, who is currently a PhD student and also working part time. Now, Srivasta, I would like to know what was your biggest challenge transitioning from a physical learning into online or blended mode of learning?
Okay, thank you, Peter, for your question. If I talk about my experience with this COVID-19 situation, and especially after the lockdown, and what challenges I faced, like while doing this transition, so I think I'll have to divide my answer into two parts, and I'll first share my experience as a student, as a research scholar, and then I'll take a couple of minutes to talk about my experience as a journalist, and maybe I can just reflect and share some experiences of those students for whom situation was much more difficult than it was for me. So as a student, to be honest, it was mostly manageable for me. And I was among those comparatively privileged students in the community who had access to technology and resources. And yes, but for my PhD, I had to face many challenges because I'm doing ethnographic research, and for that, in that situation, you really get worried and anxious when you don't get to meet people and you don't get to interview them. Like for me, I can have all the technology and the facilities, but I cannot ensure, there is no way to make sure that the women I want to interview, who belongs to the rural part of the India and who belongs to the you can say mass organizations of the political parties, they would have such technology to give me such virtual interviews. And also when you like for a person like me who's documenting everyday experiences of these women, it's very important to have some kind of trust and a relationship with them, so that then only they'll share your experiences with you. And I tried doing it virtually, but it didn't turn out really well. So yeah, and this was not only the case with me. I was a witness to the anxieties and challenges of my batchmates and students from other Indian universities who were for whom doing the field research work was very important, and that get affected during this time. And there was no way to complete that kind of those kind of interviews until and unless you change your strategy. And also yeah, research work got affected is one thing, and but second important thing was, like, for a person like me who's doing PhD in women's studies, understanding someone's experiences from their location, their epistemological positions, and considering it as a valuable knowledge is very important. And that could not happen. So this was the one problem. And as a journalist, I got the chance to interview some students from Delhi and the rural parts of Uttar Pradesh in India, where they shared their experiences. And some of the experiences were like those experiences taught me that no matter how much encourage people to use their online classes or online exams, but until and unless they'll have that structural facilities, they have that resources, they won't be able to. So yeah, I got these interviews where students have these regular anxieties that they don't have data connection in their villages, and even if they have, there is very limited data that they cannot cover the online 5 6 classes in a day, 2 3 classes in a day. And there was also one thing that I would like to share. Uh, Many students who were in their undergrad, they were not very much technology friendly, and there were one or two people in that entire village who worked in the cyber cafe who used to help these students in scanning and uploading and downloading the answer papers. And yeah, so I also got the chance to interview few visually impaired students of Delhi University and teachers who shared their challenges about this sudden transition of online education. And there is so much to say, but of course, we have time constraint. And like two things that remained with me in these interviews. And one was the teacher. She told me that now for people like us, it will be very difficult to get any kind of support within campus or in the metro or in crossing the roads even, because people do not want to even touch someone unknown because of this COVID-like situation. And the second was the experiences of a young girl. She was in class 10th, and in an interview, she told me that they have only one Android phone in the family, and there are three siblings who have to use these Android phones for their classes. And that's a very difficult situation for her. And she also said something which, of course, I would like to share. And she said that it's not only about the information. I'm getting the information. Teachers are sending the notes. They are giving us the lecture, but this is not the study. I cannot ask the questions in return. I cannot critically engage with the teachers. So yeah, these were the my experiences as a student and as a journalist, like in past 1 year.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for sharing such wonderful experience. And I hope I'll come back to you again with what you just left there. Now, moving on, I remember we had left on a very interesting point with Ashutosh with regards to his suggestions or what is on his wish list that he hoped or he wishes that institutions or academic institutions rather will do to improve the learning experiences of students. Now, back to you, Mr. Ashutosh.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Peter. So I don't want to belabor some of the points because some of the points have already been mentioned, but like mental health, of course, is like this, like overarching theme that has emerged from the pandemic and even before the pandemic. So there is a lot of very good research coming out um, in higher education context, which shows that mental health issues among students is very like widespread, especially in like PhD programs. So I can speak for that. So I think just creating some kind of an infrastructure within colleges to provide mental health support. It could be the counselors, something very simple. Another aspect could be mental health, like mental health literacy. So I think one thing that I found that students lacked, and even I lacked, is like literacy about like mental health. What works to improve like mood, what works to improve anxiety. If you're feeling depressed, what kind of resources should you seek out? And I think like literacy should be an important piece of like the puzzle. And that would be really helpful for students who are coming in, especially students who are coming in from some other countries and they are trying to adjust to a new environment and like culture. So that's one aspect, and all of the panelists have like emphasized this aspect. So that's great. Another thing that I'm thinking about is what aspects of asynchronous learning can be adapted even beyond like COVID. Even when COVID is gone, are there certain features that might be useful for universities and students? So I was speaking to a professor and about if there's anything about online teaching that she likes. And one interesting point she made was that that she could ask a question in class and she can use like the chat feature and all the students respond and she can quickly go through like the responses and ask any student, would you like to say more? So I think one of the interesting parts is that she said that she was able to engage a lot more students and ask for engagement from a lot more students. Whereas in person, you might have one or two or three students who are really proactive in class, who talk, who like raise their hands. And there are some students who don't participate or don't get a chance to participate because they might be just quiet by like nature. So I think there are some aspects of online learning that provide like accommodations to students who might know the answer, who might want to learn, who might want to engage, but they are shy and they have a harder time engaging in a classroom. So kind of incorporating those features. Um, and I think the final point that I liked about my university in particular was that even though classes were fairly like rigorous, so I think the level of rigor didn't go down, but there was a certain amount of flexibility, taking into account what the world is going through, what the students might be going through, and the playing field, frankly, isn't like level. Like you don't know because everyone is not in the same country, not in the same campus, not in the same like time zone. So you don't know how students are struggling in their own ways. So just like acknowledging that and providing accommodations in that acknowledgement. For example, for one of our classes, we have a final exam. Usually you have to do that final exam within like 12 hours. You're like sent in like a PDF and then you have to solve questions and do that in 12 hours. Because of the pandemic, we were given like 48 hours. And we asked for that because different people in different like time zones might have a harder time with a narrow like window. So I think that's something really important for universities to be flexible. And I think finally, one final point is I think socialization becomes quite a challenge during COVID. And if you are already having like mental health issues, and if you're working in a silo, that can make your mental health issues much worse. So I think it's important for universities to provide some fun but structured socialization opportunities, which students shouldn't be forced to like go to, but I think they should just have that choice of engaging in a fun way outside the classroom. So yeah, those are some of my suggestions.
Thank you very, very much, Ashutosh. I hope we can be able to engage you more in the Q&A session because you're very profoundly experienced. I would like also to announce to the audience at large that we'll be opening our Q&A session in the next 10 minutes, and we'll be like to hear more, to have a more engaging session with you. So please drop your questions at the chat box, and we'll be able to engage with our panel members accordingly. Now, moving on, we go to Mr. Felix. You raised a very important question, or rather a very important point about mental health. And I think I would still like to pick up on that because I think also Dr. Vaishali on the chat box has mentioned about that institutions, for us to enhance mental health, institutions have to take the lead on that front as well. So, Mr. Felix, based on your own pragmatic experience, what do you think institutions can do to enhance the mental health of students, or rather to increase the support towards the students?
So one of the ways institutions can help is by training, making students literate about mental health issues. Another way is that there will be availability of counselors or experts in mental health available on campuses whom students can consult. You see, mental health in itself is a very stigmatized topic. So to make students feel welcome or receptive to the idea of seeking mental health, we have to destigmatize the provision of mental health services so that students will feel free and they will feel comfortable seeking mental health. And peer provision of mental health is also another way, because like if you're my friend and you are literate about mental health issues, I might even be more comfortable sharing my issues with you than going out. So peer support in terms of mental health provision is another avenue that we can explore.
Thank you very much, Felix. And I also still hope that we can engage more with the audience on our Q&A during our Q&A session. Now, moving on to Olivia, I think I would still like to extend the same question to you. How do you think universities can really improve the learning experiences of students across the world? Or rather in Europe, based on your experience with Erasmus+, what do you think universities can do at large to improve this experience? And given the fact that we are facing a similar challenge, both teachers, have been having a challenge transitioning to digital learning, and we students as well, we have our own challenges. So how can we come to a level playing field and at the same time get the support that we need from our academic institutions?
Thank you for the question. It's quite complex, so I will try to cover all aspects. So right off the bat, I would say that in a blended or a digital environment, you will never have the same international experience than you would have in person, because it might be possible to substitute all academic aspects if you really give students the support they need and make sure they get included, get all the information they need. But when we talk about, well, an international environment, students studying in a different country, there's always also the cultural aspect, which is also very important when it comes to international experiences, and that cannot be denied. And this is nothing that can ever be substituted adequately in a digital or a blended environment. So that is just a fact. So how it will be possible to substitute that in the future, in the so-called new normal, we don't know that, because we don't know how the pandemic evolves. But I think the main key action that universities could follow at the moment is that at the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of decisions had to be taken instantly, very spontaneously, because everything happened at once and you really needed to make a quick, sometimes not so well thought out decision, because you just didn't have the time to think everything through. And so many decisions were not perfect because of that, and that is totally understandable. And I think so many universities have managed extremely well, most universities that I know. But the main key action that universities could take is just keep following up on the decisions that they made at the beginning of the pandemic, because right now it is very clear that the pandemic is not going to just at some point completely disappear. It will be a gradual transition into a new normal that we don't know yet. So I think it is extremely important to follow up on all the actions that have been taken at the beginning of the pandemic and revisit them in the future with the knowledge that we now have, with the experience that we now have, and try to adjust that. Because I feel like this whole blended learning, which I am absolutely a fan of, has sometimes become more like as a standard, basically. So, well, it's a good thing, so let's just do it. But it needs to be contemplated in the whole context. Like, how is the pandemic situation at the moment? What are the students' needs? How can we provide for those needs? Like, what are our possibilities? So how much in this blended format should be actually virtual? How much should be in presence? This will always change, and it is very, very important to keep following up on that. And then finally, the last thing, I just wanted to follow up real briefly on what I said about the first question when I talked about communication. I think it is very important that whenever universities or stakeholders, policymakers make a decision, they should make transparent how that decision came to be, because students want to be well, they do not want to be overlooked. They want to, if others make decisions that concern them, they want to understand them, because it is very frustrating if a decision gets made that you don't understand. So if you make a decision, make sure you always make very transparent how the decision came to be. I think that already makes a lot of a difference, yes.
Thank you very much, Olivia. Now we do have a question from one of our audience, Mr. Torat, and I will start this question with the Ashutosh, and then hand it over next to Srivasta. Now the question is, how can I encourage my students to continue online learning? If I'm not wrong, that is the question. How can we encourage my teenagers for learning in this pandemic situation? Ashutosh, please.
Yeah, that's a challenging question. Like, it's a personal way of like handling things, because it seems a personal question, like in the sense, because dynamics might differ in terms of how different students learn. But I can just give any general advice, because I don't think there is any policy level advice I can give with regards to this question. But just like encouraging students, supporting them, just like understanding what they are going through in terms of trying to learn online, and not putting a lot of like pressure on them, and seeing the constraints of this online learning environment, but providing any kind of support that they may need, and just talking to them about how their studies aligns with their long-term goals.
Great, thank you very much, Ashutosh. Now moving on, Srivasta, can you pick up on that?
So I think I'll just add to what Ashutosh has just said, and we all are gearing up to handle these challenges posed by the pandemic, and we are realizing the vast potential of this, blended learning methodology, what we call, and to which experts says that this is much more than combining or intermixing classroom teaching and e-learning. So basically, it's not about how we are learning or how we are enabling the process. It's mostly about looking at the learning with a different lens, So yeah, it's this blended education. It's a combination of that powerful content and the effective and innovative teaching methodologies, and the methods of that dissemination channels, and the change learning outcomes. And this is going to change the process we see learning itself. So, of course, this is not new, this blended learning, and the present crisis has just propelled the usage, and we'll have to adapt and change the way we look at the learning itself. And this integration, of digital technologies and conventional methods of teaching and learning is already a feature of higher education system around the world. And the increase in this access of devices, communication, and the students' digital skill, there is also, a need to learn some kind of soft skills or social skills if you want to adapt in any such environment. And what I think is key, of course, the way we are changing the process, enabling process, and the expectation is going to change the requirements of this higher education also. So we'll have to, I think, look at the pros and the cons of blended learning, beyond the fact that it's cheap and it takes less time, and it removes this location restriction. We'll have to look beyond this, and we'll have to brainstorm around the solutions and the challenges, I think, posed by the pandemic. And of course, it has pursued us to change the way we think about learning and change the learning and engagement outcomes for higher education and the research studies, especially. And and I think, like for universities, of course, as I always say, already said that it's not only about, it's, of course, it's very important to hold events on, so that students can have some kind of support. It's important to have, in regular touch and communication with the student regarding the situation. But it's a very important thing to have the structural changes. And what I feel is it's very easy sometimes to talk that you'll have to motivate yourself, you'll have to talk about isolation and emotions, but every new educational model or the policy, it must incorporate the mental health, not only for the students and the teachers, but I think for the teaching and the non-teaching staff and everyone to whom these educational spaces belongs to, and these should be included in the policy. And of course, when I was, trying to prepare for this conference, and I was trying to talk to one of my friends, and they said, this is a it has all the pros, and it's a very good thing because it provides you some control over the time, place, path, and everything. So, but I think that's not the same with everyone. And being a gender studies scholar, I would say that for women like me who are now staying at their home for like past 1 year, the time that is these 24 hours are not already in your control if you are living in a in a family that expects you to get used to the social roles provided to you as a woman. So there are many girls, many women who are doing research studies in some universities, but for now they are living at homes, but and for them it's not the same, and they don't have that control which we are talking about. So yeah, educational institutions must realize that they need to go through the structural changes, and remain interconnected globally. And we all have realized this importance of getting connected, living in a community, and being available for each other as a support system. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Srivasta. Now we have 10 minutes left, and we do have a very interesting comment from Dr. Nicholas, where he pointed out that university as learning institutions should rethink their role in teaching and learning. Now, I will ask this question just to Olivia, in closing. How do you think, what would be your suggestions to university in the process of rethinking their role, especially universities, as based on your pragmatic experience as a learner during the COVID times? What do you think should change?
Well, that is a very broad question. I'm not sure if I have a very good answer for that, but I can try. The first one would just be, I think, keeping dialogue, because from the university level, people who make decisions, who do implement new solutions, their average age is, of course, higher than that of students. And what do younger people do well with? It is technology, it is digital solutions. So I think that universities should be very open to what the students suggest on how to adapt to this blended learning environment, because not only are they the ones that have to deal with it, they are the ones that struggle with problems that might not have been thought about. But yeah, they are the digital generation who just know everything very, very well, who grew up with everything. I think that because we are putting ourselves when we talk about this, we talk about students as the learners and universities as those that teach the students something. But in the whole situation that we've been put in by the pandemic, this is a learning opportunity for everybody, because nobody has experience with handling a pandemic, obviously. So we're all inexperienced with this situation. We all should use this as a learning opportunity. And I think it is very, very important for all parties to see themselves as the learners in this case, to be actively seeking knowledge, to be actively seeking feedback from all parties, because if all parties work together to improve, it is much, much easier. So I could, of course, talk about very different aspects as well, but this would be my main point. Just every party should consider themselves as those who are supposed to learn from this, and together we should master this learning opportunity in favor of getting the best outcome. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Olivia. This was absolutely an amazing time. I want to thank Olivia, Ashutosh, Srivasta, and Felix for taking your time. And absolutely, I want to express my gratitude to Symbiosis for giving us this wonderful moment to express our ideas as student, or rather give student voice in this wonderful session. As we always say in Symbiosis, Vasudev Kutumbaka means the world is one big family. I would like to thank everybody who participated in this session. And as we say, we've all become a part of the global family. So thank you very much. From my end, I will say namaste. Over to you, Dr. Anita.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter, and thank you to all the students for sharing your thoughts, your experiences during the pandemic. And I think you'll have given so much, for all of us who are listening to reflect and ponder upon. I'm saying this because, I'm seeing maximum participants putting so many ideas and thoughts in the chat box. I think this has been maximum time that, they've been sharing ideas. I can just say this, that this is all a passing phenomena, and so hang on there, and thank you so much. I think it was a wonderful session. I'm now going to request Dr. Vijay Natarajan, who is the CEO of Symbiosis University Hospital and Research Center, and he is going to be speaking upon the Pelzman Effect and COVID-19.
I'm Dr. Natarajan. I'm the CEO of the Symbiosis University Hospital and Research Center. I just thought I'll talk a little bit about this slide that you see on your screen. The only thing that seems to be more internationalized than higher education seems to be COVID. So I think it's most appropriate that I talk a bit about that. And there's a very peculiar phenomena called the Pelzman Effect. Now, this gentleman, Sam Pelzman, is an economics professor, as you can see, from Chicago. Now, what this actually means is that people compensate for a certain risk. It's basically a concept of risk compensation. So people tend to be more careful when there is greater risk and less careful when they feel a little more protected. So to give you an example, what they saw is that when seatbelts were introduced into cars, people felt more secure, more protected. So they indulged in rash driving as compared to when there were no seatbelts. So that is one example. Another example is what is known as a counter Pelzman effect. To give you an example there, when people were driving in their cars and say they saw a cyclist ahead of them, if the cyclist was not wearing a helmet, that means that cyclist was not protected. They would stay away from him or her. But if they noticed a cyclist who was wearing a helmet, then this car driver would tend to go closer to that cyclist because that cyclist they perceived is protected. So as peculiar and funny as that sounds, but that is exactly what is happening in the COVID context. Last year, there was a morbid fear of COVID amongst everyone. And therefore, a greater risk was perceived, so everyone was more careful. This year around, apart from a little bit of pandemic fatigue anyway, but there is this false sense of security that people have because the vaccination campaign has started. And this effect apparently has come even before people have gotten vaccinated. That's how extreme the phenomena is. So similar to the example that I had given, people have now, as you can see, reduced the usage of masks, social distancing, hand sanitizer, so much so that even amongst us doctors and healthcare workers, the usage of protective gear, or what we call PPE, personal protective equipment, has gone down significantly. So one must realize in this entire context that this is certainly dangerous for all of us and potentially disastrous for healthcare system, because you will have more and more healthcare workers getting infected by COVID, and therefore they'll be away from work, affecting the quality of care that one can give in a hospital setting. And that, to my mind, is probably the biggest contributor to this massive second wave that we see in our country and in certain countries around the world, even a third wave. So that's all I had to say in this context. I hope you found that an interesting bit of information. And I hope you would continue to wear your masks and stay protected just like I'm doing right now. Thank you and best wishes to the conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Vijay. Thank you so much. Let me just once again thank the Faculty of Health Sciences who's given us these wonderful little nuggets, trivia, as well as very valuable tips. If you look at the schedule, there's actually a little break. but we thought that we will immediately conclude so that you can have a longer evening, afternoon, or morning with your loved ones and get back to your work. We have a special release, inaugural actually. If you remember on the first day, for those of you who were there, I mentioned the fact that the lockdown was actually really, really busy for the Symbiosis Center for International Education. We did a number of things, maybe because I think the pandemic kind of worried us, then we thought we would lose out on student engagement. One of the things that we did was a series of e-academies with students from across the world and with a number of buddy mentors. One of the activities that was done with them was each one of them from different countries teaching each other their favorite recipe. And we realized that we had this treasure trove of recipes from across the world. I think 27 or 29 different countries and almost 89 or 90 recipes. We have now put them together. We call it the World Kitchen. We're looking forward to many, many more versions of this. And I'm going to request our Chancellor, Professor Dr. S.P. Muzumdar sir, who's with us, along with Vice Chancellor Dr. Rajni Gupte and Pro Chancellor Dr. Vidya, to hold up. It is a soft copy. It's designed to be a soft copy, and we will put the link in the chat box so that all of you can enjoy some new recipes. Try them out. Hopefully, we'll come up with a video version of this soon. So if I may request, sir, to formally launch the World Kitchen. The World Kitchen is a culinary book with 89 recipes from 27 different countries, students, Indian and international, who participated in the 2020 e-academies organized by the Symbiosis Center for International Education and the Center for European Studies. Yes, sir. And if Dr. Vidya and Dr. Rajni can also join at that point of time.
Namaste to all of you. Thank you, Mrs. Patarkar, to giving this honor to me to release the publication of the World Kitchen book. I think this is one of the most novel functions that I have been witnessing in this seminar. As they say, you are what you eat. And therefore, food that we eat decides what you are. Culinary art, culinary products, and culture sometimes go hand in hand. Different countries have different recipes, different dishes, different drinks, and therefore, somehow I feel that just as sports and academic studies unite people together, so also different types of cuisines, different types of foods, they also go a long way uniting people together. I am very happy that our own students have participated in this endeavor. I have browsed through it, I have shown it to my wife, and she says that it is really, really very interesting. She has only suggested that we should print colored copy of this. That will go a long way in enhancing the beauty of this book. Thank you so much, and I have a great pleasure in releasing the book, that is The World Kitchen. Thank you.
So this was designed, as we said, to be a soft copy because of the lockdown. But your point is absolutely well taken, and we plan to do a video version as well as a hard copy, color copy. Thank you, and thank you, Muzumdar ma'am, as well. If I may now call Dr. Vidya to give her concluding remarks. If you remember, Dr. Vidya, right at the very beginning, we were saying 4 days, so many hours. I was looking at the number of participants, and it is amazing, and heartfelt thanks to everybody. So many of them have been here every single day. So it's worked out, and I hand over to you now for your concluding remarks.
Thank you, Anita, and Honorable Chancellor, Dr. Muzumdar sir, Dr. Rajni Gupte, our Vice Chancellor, Dr. Bhama, the Dean of Academics and Administration, Dr. Anita, all my colleagues at the Symbiosis Center for International Education. Like every year, this is the end of one more conference on internationalization of higher education, which is organized by the Symbiosis International University and has been always supported since the last 5 years by the Association of Indian Universities. I'm very happy that this year, in fact, the World Bank and Obrial Global, a network of a European network, has also supported us. And we are very happy that there have been participants from more than 30 countries. And I was glad to see people from faraway places like Latin America who also logged in, where I'm sure it must be very early morning there when they were attending all our sessions. So it only shows that this conference on internationalization is becoming popular day by day. And people are waiting for this conference because I have so many international academic friends who keep asking, what is the theme of the next year's conference? The last 4 days have been really fruitful. I'm sure the participants must have really gained so much because we discussed an array of topics and we did not limit our discussions only to the post-pandemic period, but we really went into the depth of even faculty coming in speaking, students' voices, and of course, the focus on blended education and reimagining internationalization. We also discussed a very important topic this afternoon, which was on networks and collaborations. And I'm sure this is the way forward for internationalization. We all know that none of us can really work in silos anymore as individuals, as organizations, as universities, and even as countries. And we need to really have a symbiotic relationship between organizations, universities, and even countries. And this pandemic has taught us that even more than yesteryears. This book, which is called The World Kitchen, I really like the name, Anita, and I think every year when we have this International Food Festival, we should call it or rename it as The World Kitchen, because it's about actually cultural sensitization in a different way. And we all know how food brings different cultures together. In fact, many of us who visit different countries first go and want to taste the food of that country just to experience the culture of that country. I remember late Dilip Padgaonkar, who was the R.K. Lakshman Chair professor with us, was so interested in culinary arts that he had written a book on cuisines and culture. And in fact, he used to lecture our students on this topic. And once I remember he telling us that the jalebis that we eat in India actually come from faraway Persia and Iran. And, so there are so many foods that we actually eat in India thinking that these are originated in our country, but their origins are different, which means cultures have transcended borders. And, that's the way human beings have experienced this cultural sensitization for several years. And it's a wonderful book that was released. Another book that, or not, I wouldn't say a book, but a magazine or an e-magazine that was released today was on collaborations. And that was also something that was very timely. So wonderful work done by the SCI team. I'm very happy that, all our faculty also participated in, in different sessions, chairing some of the sessions, or even speaking at some of the sessions. And I'm glad that our friends, our academic friends, the numbers have started increasing day by day. And those who we've really connected with since the first conference have continued with us, since the last 5 years. And that shows a great networking of Symbiosis International University with so many academic friends. So good work done. And we just hope and pray that the next year's conference is a physical conference or maybe a blended conference where those who can't travel can sit in their offices or university campuses and listen to speakers, but at least some of our friends can travel to India and experience, India and Pune city and Symbiosis. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vidya. I'd now like to invite Dr. Rajni Gupte, Vice Chancellor, Symbiosis International University. Dr. Rajni.
Respected Dr. S.B. Mazumdar, the Chancellor of this university, Dr. Vidya Rodekar, the Pro-Chancellor of the university, Dr. Bhamma, the Dean, Dr. Anita, her entire team at SIU, all other deans, directors, faculty members, and everyone attending this conference. Thank you, Anita, for giving me this opportunity to share some of my thoughts here. As I reflect on the deliberations during the last 4 days of the conference, I think there was a broad consensus on several points. One, Internationalization is beyond mobility. 2. Blended education is here to stay. 3. Students learn as much or more outside classrooms, so universities must continue to play their role in fostering social interactions. Partners in collaborative programs should be chosen intentionally to take forward mutually agreed objectives, including community-related issues. Technology has helped to bridge the distance that the pandemic has forced upon us. Technology indeed has been a great facilitator for the delivery of blended education. In fact, technology has always been there with us earlier as an aid. I recall, and I'm sure many of my colleagues will recall, that we started with using overhead projectors in classrooms way back. Then we brought in audiovisual means. Then it was the internet access in classrooms. Today, when we teach synchronously, we use various tools, and we are only using audiovisual means which have been enhanced to incorporate two-way communication now. That, of course, is very important. But when I read about one of the earliest experiments in building learning machines way back in 1953, I was fascinated that it was a Harvard psychologist, Professor Skinner, who entered his daughter's class and found everyone learning the same topic in the same way and found that they were expected to learn at the same speed. So he built a machine to personalize learning at one's own pace. Today's asynchronous tools. But in class, I think we are possibly still very much where Skinner found his daughter's class. Therefore, I believe that the edtech of the future can take us much further. Several speakers during the sessions mentioned that connecting and engaging with the students through this impersonal medium was a great challenge. So I speculate, what if artificial intelligence can help us as faculty to figure out which student finds certain topics more difficult? Remember, our students come from different regions of the world. Can we offer them more material, possibly delivered differently, keeping in mind multiple intelligences? How can AI tools help us improve the learning outcomes by giving us inputs on what works best for each student so that it's far more personalized than it is today? How can we help our students to deal with ambiguities? I'm sure that edtech companies must be working on all of this and far more. So I believe that the future promises to be very exciting for remotely delivered part of blended education. But it's also important that it will enable faculty with the support of EdTech to use it in-person time, to use the in-person time more fruitfully, to hone social skills of students through very well-crafted activities. This is possibly just speculation, but I thought I must share this with all of you. Let me end by saying that it's been a great experience to listen to so many wonderful speakers from across the globe. I look forward to more active collaborations with each one of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rajni, for summing up, as you always do, so beautifully in such a short time. Let me just very quickly say that I am extremely thankful to everyone who logged in for these 4 days from across the world. Different time zones, different geographies, different family commitments, different work commitments. But we are extremely appreciative of your support. The fact that it is virtual and the fact that we have more partners today committed to this partnership has probably meant that we were able to reach out to a larger number who now will hopefully become part of our strong academic community. A huge shout out and thanks to all our speakers, to the chairs, to the experts, to people on our advisory board who gave us nuggets of information, connected us to people. Thank you so much. This IHE has definitely been a rich one in terms of content, in terms of ideas. Thank you, participants who made the chat box a wonderfully rich place. One of the reasons why many of us go to conferences, physically, has been the fact that we meet so many new people and we have those lovely conversations over cups of chai, or a meal. I think the chat box helped do that. So thank you, participants, speakers, and experts for your valuable comments. And of course, I can't possibly end without saying a huge thank you to our team. And our team is a large team. It's not just the members at the Symbiosis Center for International Education, but it's a huge SIU team. We have members from the IT, led very ably by Dr. Amit and by Praveen. Dr. Vidya's office, of course, is our office, and therefore we draw on her people like Madhav and Mitu all the time. The Chancellor's office, the Vice Chancellor's office, Shikha from the branding, Praful from PR, Dr. Bhama's office. Everyone actually pitched in, from administrative staff and everyone, because even though it's virtual, I mean, you think that there wasn't much to do, but there's actually a lot of running around and small little things that you end up doing. So a huge shout out to people at Lovely who made us feel welcome during these days and gave us a safe home away from home. To our network partners, to our hosts, the Association of Indian Universities, thank you so much for being with us, for staying steadfast with us, and for committing to the themes that we choose each year. To the World Bank and to Obrial Global, thank you so much. Your support means a lot to us. And to be honest, it opens up doors in geographies that we hadn't ventured into previously, and to kinds of conversations and collaborations that we hadn't thought of before. And finally, to my family in SCIE, nothing is possible without you. See you next year. As Dr. Vidya said, blended is probably something to think about. So those of you who can come, we look forward, fingers crossed, that we can meet you in person. The rest we will meet virtually. And in the meantime, let's keep these conversations and discussions continued. Please stay safe. Keep those health tips in mind. Wear your masks. Keep safe. Keep safe. Keep happy. Thank you so much.